Once again, it was the time of the Lunar New Year. My husband and I moved with our child into the city of Fanjin, never expecting to run into my aunt and her family. They asked me, "After all this time, you should have let go of your anger. When would you return to marry the young Marquis Wei Kai?" Wei Kai was my childhood sweetheart to whom I was once betrothed. We were supposed to have married 5 years ago, but on the day of the wedding, he suddenly changed his mind. He slapped me right there in the street and left with his cousin Shinli. I tore up the marriage contract and came to this remote place north of Fanjin. When we met again, my aunt said, "Young Marquis Wei has always been thinking of you." On the day of his grand wedding with Miss Shin, he personally said that once you admit your mistake and return, he will marry you as his equal wife. What a fine equal wife indeed. I smiled faintly and said calmly, "Aunt, I got married 3 years ago and my child is already 2 years old now." Wei Kai thought I was still holding a grudge, unaware that I had already married someone else. The news of my marriage had not yet reached the capital, so when I met my aunt in Fanjin, she still didn't know. Amid the falling snow, I held an umbrella and carried pastries I had bought for my daughter. As I crossed the stone bridge, I saw my aunt and cousin on the other end staring at me in surprise after 5 years apart. My aunt's first words were a complaint. "Lingwei, where have you been all these years? You vanished without a trace, not even a word to us." I lifted my eyelids slightly, my expression indifferent, showing no joy at reuniting with family. In contrast, my aunt and cousin seemed quite delighted. My cousin said, "Cousin, you've finally shown up. Young Marquis Wei has been searching for you all these 5 years. You must come back with us." My aunt also said, "That's right, Lingwei. You don't know, but the young Marquis has been highly favored by His Majesty these past 2 years. He's the most celebrated figure in the capital right now. Once you marry him, you'll be the admired Marchioness that everyone envies. How wonderful. And our family will share in your glory. Won't we?" My aunt was overjoyed. She and my cousin both looked as if a pie had fallen from the sky. Yet in the past, they never treated me with any kindness. After my parents passed away, they cut off contact with me. Now that there's profit to be made, they come knocking at my door. I felt a bit like laughing and interrupted their delusions, saying, "Aunt, cousin, I will not marry Wei Kai again." Mentioning this name that I hadn't spoken of in so long, my voice was unusually calm, as if he were just an unrelated stranger. My aunt and cousin couldn't help but fall silent in surprise, looking at me strangely, clearly not believing what I said. After all, I used to love Wei Kai so much that it caused a stir throughout the capital. They say that the young lady of the Mang family, having no parents to guide her, behaves in a completely unruly manner all day long. Even before marriage, she is seen coming and going with the young Marquis of the Wei family. In my rebellious youth, I paid no attention to such gossip. I only knew that Wei Kai and I had been betrothed since childhood, and we were meant to be together forever. So I clung to him. I made him fly kites with me, make paper lanterns with me. From the time we met at 7 until I came of age at 15, we were never apart. If nothing unexpected happened, by the time I turned 16, I would have happily married Wei Kai just like that. Unfortunately, that summer, Wei Kai's cousin Shinli also came to the capital and stayed temporarily at the Wei residence. She was well-behaved and obedient, smiling without showing her teeth. The epitome of a refined young lady from a good family. Standing next to me, she was everyone's idea of the perfect daughter-in-law. Unlike me, who had no sense of propriety. After all, you lost your parents at a young age. How could you compare to a young lady raised under the strict guidance of the Shin family? Their disdainful words fell upon my ears, leaving me both embarrassed and aggrieved. I wanted to find Wei Kai and ask him if he would look down on me too, but when I arrived at our meeting place, I found Shinli was there as well. She smiled delicately and said, "Miss Mang, this is my first time going out, so I asked my cousin to accompany me. I hope you don't mind, do you?" Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't have minded at all. But today was the Qixi festival. Wei Kai had promised to go to the temple fair with me, but he gave the lantern I had given him to Shinli. As I watched Shinli holding that familiar lantern, thinking about the 2 days and nights I had spent making it, my face suddenly flushed with heat. "Wei Kai, what do you mean? The night was crowded, the wind strong. My sudden challenge caught Wei Kai by surprise. He frowned slightly, glanced at Chun-Li, then pulled me aside and whispered, "My cousin isn't familiar with the capital, so I brought her along." "Why are you angry?" I didn't even know why I was so angry. Maybe it's because I've heard too many comments lately praising his cousin while putting me down. Or maybe it's because of that lantern. I tugged at his fingers and asked with grievance, "Why did you give the lantern I gave you to Chun-Li?" Wei Kai was taken aback, a hint of guilt flashing across his handsome face as he explained. "She said the lantern was very beautiful, so I lent it to her to have a look." I asked suspiciously, "You didn't give it to her, did you?" Wei Kai replied, "Why would I give your things to her?" Those words easily won me over. I couldn't help but squint my eyes and smile, then asked again in a sticky, sweet voice, "Then you don't dislike me either?" Wei Kai said, "Dislike what?" I said, "Dislike that I'm not well educated and refined enough." Wei Kai said, "Well, I do dislike that a little." I got angry again and swung my fist, punching him on the shoulder. The force wasn't light, but Wei Kai didn't even flinch. However, Chun-Li's eyes reddened. She quickly ran over, tugged at Wei Kai's sleeve, and said pitifully, "Cousin, does it hurt? It's all my fault for making Miss Meng angry. If Miss Meng wants to hit someone, hit me instead, not my cousin." She stood between them, sobbing, drawing frequent glances from passers-by. I frowned, wanting to tell her to stop crying, but she only cried even harder. There was no other way. Wei Kai had no choice but to ask the maid beside her to take her back. But Chun-Li kept tugging at the corner of his clothes, refusing to let go. Wei Kai was helpless in the face of his tearful cousin and could only say to me, "We'll make it up to you next time. My cousin has weak eyes and shouldn't cry for too long. I'll take her back first." So the Qixi festival I had been waiting for so long ended before it even began. Wei Kai's free time no longer belonged to me. Chun-Li's presence by his side was becoming more and more frequent. After the Qixi festival, if I wanted to meet him alone, I had to do it secretly, making sure Chun-Li wouldn't find out. I couldn't hold it in any longer and complained to Wei Kai at a tavern, saying, "Don't you think we're acting like we're having an affair?" Wei Kai spat out a mouthful of tea, his fair cheeks instantly flushing red, his eyes shimmering as if brimming with spring water, and he said hoarsely, "What nonsense are you talking about?" I looked at him seriously. "I'm not talking nonsense. According to the date on the marriage contract, you were supposed to marry me this year, but now even meeting you has to be done in secret." This was indeed a problem. Wei Kai rubbed my head, pulled me into his embrace, and pondered, "In that case, I'll have my mother arrange our wedding first. Once you enter the household, we can see each other every day, and you won't have to put up with my cousin's attitude anymore." Wei Kai curled his lips into a smile and gave me a jade hairpin as compensation for that Qixi festival day. I wore that hairpin ever after, looking forward to the day I would marry him. But that day never came. At the end of August, the nanny who had taken care of me since I was a child passed away. I rarely had contact with my aunt, and during holidays, the house was cold and quiet with only the nanny keeping me company. Her death dealt me a heavy blow. On the day the funeral was over, I stayed alone in the desolate Meng residence and suddenly felt very lonely, longing to see Wei Kai. So I rushed to the Wei residence to see him, but I saw him holding a disheveled Chun-Li in his arms, stroking her long hair, comforting her over and over. "It's all right, Ollie." Wei Kai's eyes were full of pity, his voice gentle and beautiful, yet it stunned me deeply. My gaze was fixed on them, then shifted to the shattered lantern by Wei Kai's feet. It was the flower lantern I had made, half burned and now so unsightly. My heart ached terribly, filled with both anger and sorrow. I walked over to pick up my lantern. Wei Kai finally noticed me, released Chun-Li, and said to me, "Lingwei, what are you doing here?" I picked up the lantern, not wanting to pay him any attention. Wei Kai grabbed my wrist and said, "The lantern suddenly caught fire just now and almost hurt my cousin. Let's just throw this lantern away. I'll buy you a new one. Okay?" I lowered my head and shook off his hand without a word. I ran outside. Wei Kai chased after me and finally stopped me on the street. He studied my expression and asked, Ling Wei. I glared at him angrily, no longer able to suppress the grievances in my heart. I could ignore the gazes of others, but I simply couldn't ignore Wei Kai. His every move and glance could tear my heart to pieces, but he was still completely unaware. Holding back my tears, I gazed steadily into his nervous eyes and softly asked, Wei Kai, do you like me? Wei Kai was taken aback, avoiding my gaze, though the tips of his ears turned slightly red. Why are you asking that? I was too eager to know the answer, so I grabbed his sleeve and pressed him again urgently. Do you like me? Wei Kai moved, breaking free from my hand, and coughed lightly. There are so many people watching. Ling Wei, let's talk about it when we get back. I won't. Realizing that Wei Kai had been avoiding me, my emotions suddenly erupted. Why was he so gentle and comforting Shenli yet unwilling to comfort me? My heart ached with bitterness. I bit my lip and threw myself into his arms, but he steadied my shoulders and said, seriously, in public, men and women should maintain proper boundaries. Ling Wei, before he could finish, Shenli's voice rang out. Cousin. Shenli, now fully dressed, rushed over breathlessly and subtly linked her arm with Wei Kai's. This scene stunned me, and I let out 2 cold laughs, the words spilling out. Indeed, I shouldn't be too familiar with you as a man and a woman. Unlike your cousin, the two of you, disheveled and clinging to each other, don't seem to care about such propriety. Mang Ling Wei. Wei Kai cut me off, both shocked and furious. While the surrounding commoners buzzed with discussion over my words, Shenli staggered, tears instantly streaming down her face. My reputation has never been good to begin with, so I don't care about my own virtue. But Shenli hasn't married yet. Once this matter spreads, how will she ever face people again? Wei Kai was truly furious, his face dark and frightening as he tightly gripped my wrist. Stop talking nonsense. It's just a lantern. I'll compensate you for it. Don't slander my cousin. Wei Kai's words carried a hidden warning, and his grip on me was painfully tight. Yet my heart ached even more than my body. Seeing how he defended Shenli, I forced a smile and said, Am I really talking nonsense? Or do you two have something to hide? I saw it with my own eyes. Bang! A crisp slap rang out, cutting off my words. Wei Kai said coldly, Mang Ling Wei, that's enough. I froze. My face burned. And for a moment, I couldn't process what had just happened. But tears began to fall uncontrollably. Since we were children, Wei Kai had never once hit me. Even when I caused trouble and got him involved, he would always shield me behind his back. I never imagined that one day he would raise his hand against me for someone else. A hint of triumph flashed in Shenli's eyes as she whimpered, Cousin. She covered her chest and collapsed toward Wei Kai. Wei Kai picked her up horizontally and left without giving me another glance. I stared unblinkingly as they walked away, my vision blurred by tears. In a daze, I thought I heard Wei Kai sigh. From that day on, rumors spread endlessly throughout the capital. Everyone said I'd been rejected by Wei Kai and the marriage contract was void. The Wei family also delayed in coming to propose. My heart felt as cold as ashes. So I took out the marriage contract I had carefully preserved and tore it into pieces. I also wrote a letter and entrusted someone to deliver it to Wei Kai along with the torn contract. Then I left the capital and came to this remote place north of Fanjin. For many years, I never returned until today when I met my aunt. Memories of the past came flooding back. My heart is as calm as still water, no longer feeling the slightest trace of sorrow or anger. My aunt remained silent for a long time, studying my expression, then smiled and said, Ling Wei, are you still angry with young Marquis Wei? I knew about what happened back then. You were both young and hot-tempered and had a bit of a quarrel. Isn't it time to let go of that anger now? I smiled faintly and replied, It's all in the past. Wei Kai, who was once inseparable from me, married Shenli the year after I left, and now I too have a husband and children. We have long since become strangers. Seeing the relief on my face, my aunt said, It's good that you can let go. Actually, young Marquis Wei still has you in his heart. On the day of his grand wedding with Miss Shen, he said himself that once you return, he would take you as his equal wife. What a fine equal wife. I curled my lips in a sarcastic smile and said calmly, Aunt, you probably don't know yet. I got married 3 years ago and my child is 2 years old now. What? My cousin was shocked, his eyes filled with disbelief. My aunt was as if struck by lightning, doubtfully asking, "Weren't you interested in young Marquis Wei?" How this matter was truly unexpected, leaving both of them so shocked they couldn't speak. I took the opportunity to invite them, saying, "Come with me. I'll take you to see Nian. Nian is my daughter." When I returned, she was playing in the snow in the yard. Upon seeing my aunt and cousin, she tilted her little head and asked, "Are you here to see father?" I shook my head. "No, Nian, this is your great aunt and cousin." "Hello, great aunt." "Hello, cousin," Nian obediently called out, and my aunt couldn't help but freeze. Is this really your daughter?" The two of them were astonished, only believing what I said after seeing it with their own eyes. I smiled faintly, patted my daughter's head, went inside, and took out a box from deep within the cabinet, handing it to my cousin. "Please take this back and return it to Wei Kai." "Is this for young Marquis Wei?" my cousin asked curiously. "What's inside?" I replied calmly, "Just some old things. When I left the capital back then, though I tore up the engagement letter in a fit of anger, I still couldn't bring myself to let go of Wei Kai. So I took with me some small trinkets he had given me. Inside there was our token of love jade pendant. It was a family heirloom jade that only the heir of the Wei family possessed. Wei Kai gave it to me when he was 15, and now many years have passed. He married another. I married another. This jade pendant should be returned to him." My expression remained calm all along. My cousin, feeling disgruntled, didn't ask further and only said, "Then should the news of your marriage also be told to the young Marquis?" I was taken aback for a moment and said, "As you wish. Anyway, seeing what's in this box, Wei Kai should understand what I mean. Between him and me, the ties of this life are severed." My aunt sighed with regret. The wealth and status that were within her grasp had just slipped away. She couldn't help but say, "Ling Wei, are you really willing to accept this? After all these years of affection, you're just going to throw it away like that? Are you really willing?" I nodded and said, "I am willing. Even if it started out of anger towards Wei Kai, later, marrying him was my own choice." My aunt had nothing more to say and left with my cousin, taking the box with them. The capital was thousands of miles away from Fanjin, and it wasn't until half a month later that we received further news. My cousin wrote to say that he had already given the box to Wei Kai. It happened on the 10th day of the first lunar month at young Marquis Wei's birthday banquet. His cousin handed him the box. When Wei Kai opened it and saw what was inside, his eyes instantly reddened. He asked his cousin where I was. His cousin answered truthfully, telling him that I had already married someone else. Who would have thought that such a brief sentence would leave the once high-spirited young Marquis frozen in place, coughing up a mouthful of blood on the spot? I never expected Wei Kai to react so strongly. Even less did I anticipate that he would come to Fanjin amid the swirling snow. His tall and elegant figure stood outside the door, solitary and alone, radiating an indescribable loneliness. Nian pushed open the courtyard gate and called out to me, "Mother, someone is here to see you." "Who is it?" I walked out of the house in confusion and looked toward the yard, unexpectedly meeting a pair of familiar eyes. Wei Kai was holding an umbrella, staring intently at Nian, but when he suddenly looked up and saw me, he froze instantly. Time flowed by as if a dream had passed through the years. Wei Kai's features had grown even more handsome and profound than in his youth, yet his eyes remained the same as before, clear and bright like a freshly washed sky. His lips moved slightly as he rasped, "Long time no see, Wei." I frowned, knowing there was no avoiding it, and replied with equal composure, "So it's the young Marquis Wei." Old friends reunited, one still using the childhood nickname while the other only addressed him by his title. A dim light flickered in Wei Kai's eyes as he looked down at Nian, murmuring in a daze, "Is this your daughter?" Nian, feeling his gaze, instinctively shrank behind me. I picked up Nian, pretending not to notice the tremor in Wei Kai's voice, and calmly replied, "Yes." Snow-laden pine branches bent low, their weight dusting the umbrella. Wei Kai's face instantly turned pale, almost as white as the snow on the umbrella. In that moment, It was as if he had died once. After a long silence, he finally asked softly, "Why?" I replied indifferently, "No reason. Getting married and having children is just the natural course of life." The natural course, Wei Kai repeated, his eyes churning with overwhelming emotions as he smiled bitterly. Nian was a bit curious and asked in her childish voice, "Uncle, who are you?" Wei Kai stared at her blankly, then suddenly his eyes reddened. "I am an old acquaintance of your mother." An old acquaintance. Nian didn't understand and tilted her head in confusion. I explained to her. "It means someone we knew from before." "Oh." Nian suddenly understood, her bright eyes fixed on Wei Kai, unable to comprehend why this adult seemed on the verge of tears. "Ling Wei." Wei Kai opened his mouth to say something else, but I cut him off. "Go away." He froze, watching helplessly as I carried Nian into the house. The snow seemed to fall even heavier, and I had no intention of inviting him inside to sit. Wei Kai stood alone in the snow for a long time. Even after the snow stopped, he still hadn't left. His face completely drained of color from the cold. I thought about it and really didn't want a corpse lying at my doorstep. So I pushed the door open and asked him, "What exactly do you want?" Wei Kai's gaze followed me, his tone bitter. "Ling Wei, are you still holding a grudge against me for that day when I slapped you?" Old memories resurfaced with his words, and I frowned. "That's all in the past. But I can't let it go," Wei Kai said. "All these years I've never forgotten." He lifted his gaze and beneath the umbrella, those eyes that once captivated my soul still held their mesmerizing power. Yet I no longer feel the same stirring in my heart as I did in my youth. Wei Kai stared at my expression, neither sorrowful nor joyful, and said in despair, "What will it take for you to forgive me? If I repay you, will that suffice?" He abruptly grabbed my wrist and used my hand to deliver a harsh slap across his own face. A crisp sound rang out. Not only did his pale cheek turn red, but even my palm felt a bit sore. Yet even so, I remained unmoved and simply said, "Let go." Wei Kai refused, stubbornly staring at me as if waiting for me to soften. I sneered coldly, curling my lips mockingly. "You've hurt my hand." Wei Kai was taken aback and finally let go. It seemed he understood that I would no longer feel the slightest bit of heartache for him. "You shouldn't have come looking for me," I said. "From the day you chose to marry Shinli as your wife, there was no longer any possibility for us. Or are you still thinking of taking me as your equal wife?" Wei Kai, with reddened eyes, said, "Why can't I? We were betrothed since childhood. You were always meant to be my wife." "She hasn't been for a long time." A gentle voice came from nearby. A young man carrying a medicine case appeared behind us and gave me a slight smile. "Ling Wei, I'm back." Seeing him, my face instantly lit up with joy as I threw myself into his arms. "Ang. Though I am now married with children, I still cannot change my true nature. I never learned the restraint and modesty expected of a lady from a respectable family, and I continue to throw myself recklessly toward the person I love. Fortunately, Song Guyang is already my husband. He never pushes me away or scolds me. Instead, he wraps his long arm around me, pulling me into his embrace, a gentle smile playing on his lips. I asked him softly, "Why did you come back so early today?" Song Guyang said, "There weren't many customers at the pharmacy, so I closed early." He opened his medicine case, took out a paper package containing 2 sticks of candied hawthorn berries, and said, "These are for you and Nian." After saying that, he looked at Wei Kai. The atmosphere between the two men instantly shifted, faintly carrying a spark as they subtly sized each other up. In the end, Song Guyang was the first to laugh. Speaking up, "This gentleman must be the young Marquis Wei, I presume." Wei Kai straightened his posture, the dignified bearing cultivated over decades in a noble household evident for all to see, though the bright red mark on his face somewhat marred his composure. He looked at Song Guyang, equally unwilling to be outdone. "So you are her husband?" "Not much to speak of." Hearing this, Song Guyang turned to me, his voice tinged with a hint of pitifulness. "Ling Wei, am I really that bad?" I immediately cupped his face and said earnestly, "Nonsense. Yang is the most outstanding doctor in all of Fanjin City. Whether it's medical skills, knowledge of pharmacology, or even his figure and appearance. Which aspect isn't top tier? Don't listen to the irrelevant talk of others. I shot Wei Kai a glare, and he called out to me, sounding a bit hurt. Lingwei. Back when we were still in the capital, I had always defended him everywhere. When had I ever neglected him in front of others? Wei Kai's face turned pale and a flicker of jealousy flashed in his eyes as he looked at Song Guyang. I stepped forward and unceremoniously gave him the order to leave. You should go now, and don't bother us again. I have nothing to do with you anymore. Please don't call me Lingwei from now on. Address me as Mrs. Song. After saying that, I walked into the courtyard with Song Guyang and prepared to close the gate. Seeing this, Wei Kai reached out a hand to hold the door, pleading desperately. Wait, let me speak with you a little longer. You don't know. There are still so many things I haven't told you. I took a deep breath, my patience nearly worn thin, and said coldly, what else do you want to say? Wei Kai met my icy gaze, his eyes trembling slightly, but he couldn't utter a single word. He knew that given my temperament, no matter how much he said at this moment, I wouldn't listen. So he still let go of my hand, his eyes downcast with a look of deep sorrow. The courtyard gate closed, shutting out his desolate expression. Song Guyang brushed the snow from my head and said gently, it's all right. I looked up at him and couldn't help but sigh. I didn't know Wei Kai would come looking for me. Even though when I left 5 years ago, he was utterly disappointed in me and never mentioned the engagement again after marrying Shinli. I even thought he had long stopped caring about me. So why did he come to my door today with such a desolate expression? I didn't miss the way he looked at Nian. It seemed utterly heartbroken. Could it be that he thought I had been preserving my chastity for him all these years? Why? I felt somewhat resentful, wishing I could never see Wei Kai again. But Wei Kai found out where I lived and started sending gifts every few days. Expensive bracelets, earrings, the latest Suto embroidery and shoe braids from the fabric shops. He sent them all one by one. Even though I returned every single item, he still refused to give up. On the day Song Guyang went out to treat patients, he came again. This time, I learned my lesson and didn't open the door for him, but he simply climbed over the wall and came in. I was so angry I almost laughed. I said to him, a noble young marquis like you climbing over someone's courtyard wall. Aren't you afraid people will laugh at you if word gets out? Wei Kai coughed lightly. I don't care. He looked at me and said, I came this time just to find out why you married Song Guyang. He's nothing but a country doctor. How is he worthy of you? Did he force you into this marriage by holding a favor over your head? At this, a shadow of gloom flickered in Wei Kai's eyes as he said coldly, if he really forced you, I will make sure he pays the price. I glanced mockingly at Wei Kai and sneered. He didn't force me. I did it willingly. But he's just a physician, Wei Kai said with some reluctance. What exactly do you see in him? What is it that he lacks compared to Song Guyang? Wei Kai himself didn't realize how aggrieved his expression looked at that moment. I shook my head mockingly and said, you've uncovered so much, even knowing that he once saved me. But have you ever wondered why I almost died? Wei Kai stared blankly and asked, why? The mockery at the corner of my lips deepened. Actually, 4 years ago, I went back to the capital once. Back then, tearing up the marriage contract and leaving was nothing more than an act of momentary pride. Just a few months later, I began to regret it. Life outside the capital was far from easy, and the area north of Fanjin was especially bone-chillingly cold. I had traveled all the way to this distant place, with no one to rely on, renting a small courtyard all by myself. I often found myself feeling lonely, lost in thought as I stared at the little trinkets Wei Kai had given me. Every object is a piece of memory. Every day, as I look at these things, how can I not think of the person? The resentment in my heart gradually subsided, and I couldn't help but recall Wei Kai's kindness toward me. I even began to reflect on myself, thinking that perhaps I was indeed at fault for exposing Wei Kai and Shinli's entanglement right on the street. If this gets out, it won't be good for Wei Kai's reputation either. So, it's understandable that he was angry, right? I couldn't help but make excuses for him, comforting myself as I sneakily and shamefully slipped back to the capital. At that time, on my way to the Wei residence, I was still thinking that I couldn't let Wei Kai know I had forgiven him so easily. He had to apologize to me and cut ties with Shinli. As I pondered, I made my way to the Wei residence only to find it bustling with joy, adorned with red silk and vibrant decorations, clearly celebrating a festive occasion. I froze in surprise and asked who is getting married at the Wei residence. Perhaps it was because I had traveled a long way and looked disheveled, but the person beside me didn't recognize me and replied, "Who else could it be? It's naturally the young Marquis of the Wei family. Today is his grand wedding celebration." The festivities have blocked the entire street. I stood frozen in place, unable to believe what I had just heard. After a long moment, I finally asked, "Who is he going to marry? Shouldn't his fiancé be me?" "Oh, right. I already tore up the marriage certificate." A suffocating pain filled my heart. My eyes widened and I could barely catch my breath. There was only one thought in my mind. Wei Kai really didn't want me anymore. I had only been gone for 4 months, and he had already married someone else. He didn't even come looking for me. I was the one who came back on my own. I want to make up with him, but he no longer cares. Tears welled up in my eyes. I lowered my head to wipe them away and saw Wei Kai standing at the door. An exquisite bridal sedan chair stopped in front of the Wei residence. Wei Kai reached out his hand and took hold of the bride as she stepped out of the sedan. The bride's figure looked somewhat familiar, accompanied by the exclamations of those nearby. Of course, it's Miss Shinli. Who else could it be but her? There was a time when I imagined myself marrying Wei Kai, just like the scene before me now. Wei Kai was wearing red wedding attire, and I was also dressed in a red bridal gown, waiting for him to take my hand and lead me through the door. But when this day actually arrived, I was merely watching from the sidelines. I had neither the courage to rush out and confront him, nor the nerve to let Wei Kai find out because it was I who tore up the marriage contract. It was I who left the capital in a fit of anger. I thought Wei Kai would soften and apologize, realizing his mistake, but he just changed his bride. It seems that with or without me, it's all the same. With Shinli there, why would he need to wait for me to return? Realizing this, I could no longer stay and fled the capital in disgrace. I never expected to encounter bandits on the road, and to protect my innocence, I had no choice but to jump off the cliff. It was Song Guiyang who found me at the bottom of the cliff. If he hadn't happened to be gathering herbs in the mountains at that time, I might have already died there. But even though I survived, I still refused to eat, drink, or speak. Wei Kai's marriage completely broke my heart. For a moment, I felt neither sorrow nor joy, as if there was nothing left in the world that I cared about. Seeing me in such a state of despair, Song Guiyang brought me to his medicine hut. Every day all kinds of people came to him seeking medical treatment. Even though they were tormented by illness, they still longed to live. Compared to them, my own troubles seemed like nothing more than pointless whining. I stayed for only a few months before I felt too ashamed to keep trying to end my life. Song Guiyang not only saved my life but also rescued me from my confusion and pain. He tirelessly took care of me, seeing patients during the day and coming back at night to brew medicine for me. No matter how immature I was, I still understood the importance of repaying kindness. After recovering my health, I stayed on to help him manage the medicine hut. As time passed, feelings grew between us. I married him, gave birth to Nian, moved to Fanjin City, and encountered my aunt's family. Old acquaintances appeared one after another, but I was no longer the Meng Lingwei I once was. I would no longer be moved by Wei Kai, nor would I let his every word and action dictate my sorrows and joys as I had in the past. He is no different to me now than a stranger. I told him the truth of the past because I wanted him to know that I have let go. Wei Kai, we were once engaged and I did admire you, but that's all in the past. You now have Shinli as your wife, and I have found my own beloved. Why must you continue to stir up trouble? I didn't understand and looked at him in confusion. Since hearing what I said, Wei Kai's complexion had been poor, as if he had lost his soul. He murmured blankly, "So, you came back." I didn't understand his reaction and nodded, "Yes, and I happened to arrive just in time for your grand wedding with Shinli. Since you were already devoted to your cousin, why didn't you just tell me? Were you afraid I would still cling to you?" Apart from this reason, I couldn't think of any other. Wei Kai used to be patient with me in every way. Perhaps he had long been fed up inside. That's why after I left, he couldn't wait to marry Shinli. My expression remained indifferent, but Wei Kai's eyes reddened as he shook his head and said, "That's not it." He moved his lips as if struggling to speak, let out a desolate laugh, and then with a complicated mood said, "What if I told you I did it to spite you too?" I paused, a flicker of confusion in my eyes. Out of spite? What does that mean? Could Wei Kai be implying that he married Shinli just to spite me? Under my gaze, Wei Kai curved his lips into a smile and blinked, the faint trace of a tear still visible at the corner of his eye. He said slowly, "Meng Lingwei, do you believe that in this lifetime I have only ever liked you? That I only ever wanted to marry you?" A bitter smile mingled with tears as if carrying endless sorrow. Wei Kai looked at me, his voice gentle and affectionate. Recounting a long overdue confession, he said, "Meng Lingwei, I have never once looked down on you. In this world, some admire flawless jade, while others cherish flowing streams and falling blossoms. But Wei Kai only loved that bright and lively girl. Her name was Meng Lingwei, and she was his childhood sweetheart. When she turned 16, she would marry him. Little did she know that her childhood companion had been looking forward to that day for a very long time. But that day will never come. In this world, fate often plays tricks, and many are those who love deeply but are destined to part. Yet Meng Lingwei at 16 did not know, and Wei Kai at 18 did not know either. They were used to bickering and playing around, inseparable despite the constant noise, thinking their bond was as strong as bones connected by sinews, when in reality it was as fragile as a layer of morning dew. Wei Kai was not unaware that his mother did not like Meng Lingwei and preferred his cousin Shinli. He was also well aware that Shinli's arrival had made Meng Lingwei's situation even more difficult, with more and more people openly or subtly belittling her. He simply believed that none of this had anything to do with Shinli. She was innocent. As for Meng Lingwei, he would protect her himself. Even if others disliked her, as long as he liked her, that was enough. He didn't realize that he himself was also being influenced, gradually neglecting Meng Lingwei. He even slapped her when she was upset. Wei Kai didn't use much force in that slap, thinking it wouldn't hurt much. But Meng Lingwei's tears fell like a broken string, and her crying made him unable to help but feel heartache. Wei Kai warned himself not to be soft-hearted. He had to teach her a lesson. How dare she slander his relationship with Shinli in front of everyone? It was because he had been too lenient with her in the past. He had intended to let Meng Lingwei go home and cool off. But who would have thought she would give him such a grand gift when he saw the torn marriage certificate? Wei Kai's eyes turned red with fury. But that wasn't the most infuriating part. The most infuriating part was that Meng Lingwei had written him a letter with only one sentence. "Wei Kai, I hope you and your cousin die soon." Such a vicious curse wasn't just directed at Shinli. It didn't spare him either. Wei Kai felt a surge of anger in his heart. Combined with Shinli and his mother's constant instigations over the past few days, he deliberately decided to give Meng Lingwei the cold shoulder. He was waiting for Meng Lingwei to take the initiative and apologize. But Meng Lingwei left the capital directly, and no one knew where she had gone. Wei Kai was so angry he almost spat blood. His mother then brought up his marriage, tentatively suggesting that since he had fallen out with that girl from the Meng family, he might as well consider Shinli. Wei Kai was stunned. He hadn't wanted to marry Shinli in the first place. But if Meng Lingwei knew he was going to marry Shinli, wouldn't she definitely be unable to sit still? Then she'd have no choice but to come back. So in a fit of anger, Wei Kai agreed. He clearly rewrote the marriage certificate and even kept the letter Shinli had written scolding him, storing them both together in a box. Yet out of sheer stubbornness, he kept putting it off until the following spring and never went to find Meng Lingwei. He didn't know that Meng Lingwei had gone north of Fanjin and had no idea he was about to get married. He thought Meng Lingwei simply detested him so much that she wouldn't even come back to see him get married. Wei Kai almost despondently married Shinli as if he had given up and decided to let things fall apart. He didn't notice that Meng Lingwei was right outside the Wei residence watching as he took someone else's hand. Childhood sweethearts, innocent and carefree, all because of a moment of anger. They passed each other by, parting for life. At the moment of the wedding ceremony, Wei Kai still clung to unrealistic fantasies in his heart. He actually told everyone that if Meng Lingwei returned, he would marry her as his equal wife. But she did not return. This time, out of anger, she stayed away for an unusually long time. It wasn't until 4 years later that her cousin handed him a box. Inside were the family heirloom jade pendant he had given to Meng Lingwei, a jade hairpin, a silk flower folding fan, and earring accessories. Overjoyed, he thought Meng Lingwei had returned and quickly asked where she was. Her cousin was taken aback for a moment, then said, "She is already married." It was like a bolt from the blue, instantly shattering his deluded dream. Wei Kai was unaware that he was spitting up blood, murmuring as he asked, "Where is it?" Fanjin. Snowflakes scattered and the sky slowly began to let fall a light snow again. Wei Kai said he had never looked down on me, then fell into an eerie silence, his expression constantly shifting. Inside the house, Nian woke up startled from her sleep. I went in, picked her up, and gently soothed her. Wei Kai watched me intently through the window, his expression gradually calming. He said, "I'm sorry for disturbing you." I was a bit surprised, but seeing that he had come to terms with it, I said calmly, "Since you know, you should leave Fanjin." Wei Kai lowered his gaze and hummed in agreement. "I'll leave in a couple of days." He hesitated and asked, "Can I hug Nian?" I frowned, my eyes showing weariness. Wei Kai quickly said, "I don't mean anything else. You don't have to worry that I'll hurt her." After saying this, he looked at Nian with an expression full of envy. Nian looked at him and stretched out her arms. "Uncle, hold me." She was still young and didn't understand the grudges between adults. Just noticing Wei Kai was feeling down, she reached out her hand. Wei Kai's eyes lit up, looking at me pitifully. I sighed and still handed Nian to him. "Hold her properly." Wei Kai was flattered and carefully picked up Nian. He gazed at the girl's features. Though she was still young, she looked so much like me. Wei Kai watched her, unable to hold back the tears welling in his eyes, a faint smile curling at the corners of his mouth. Nian touched the corner of his eye and asked curiously, "Uncle, why are you crying?" Wei Kai replied, "Because I let down someone who once loved me very much. If it weren't for my mistake, perhaps my child with her would be as old as you are now." I realized he was talking about me. I shot him a glance to stop his nonsense in front of the child and took Nian from his arms. "All right, you've seen her. You've held her. It's time to go, isn't it? From now on, don't send any more of your things. It's only ruining my reputation for no reason." Wei Kai nodded bitterly and said, "I won't." It seemed he had finally come to his senses and left before the snow grew heavier. Before leaving, he said, "If Song Guyang ever treats you poorly, bring Nian and come find me in the capital. I will always have a place for you both." I scoffed and said, "I don't need it." Wei Kai's eyes dimmed, and in that moment, I heard his sigh once more. After Song Guyang returned home and learned that Wei Kai had visited, he hurriedly asked if I was all right. I happily told him that Wei Kai had already left and would not be coming back. Song Guyang was puzzled and asked me why I was so certain. I sneered and said, "As long as he still has any sense of shame, he won't come." Admittedly, I was the one who tore up the marriage contract first, but I didn't force him to choose Shinli. Since he made his choice, he shouldn't regret it. The elders of the Wei family never really liked me. I couldn't see it clearly before, but now I can understand. If it weren't for their dissatisfaction, how could my marriage with Wei Kai have been delayed until Shinli appeared? Including those words that praised Shinli while belittling me, they were deliberately spread in front of me by someone with an agenda, hoping to make me feel ashamed. Wei Kai's mother really went to great lengths. I curled my lips in a cold sneer, pushing aside the trivial matters of the capital. Unaware that Wei Kai had returned and was already reorganizing the estate, he divorced Shinli on the grounds that she had not borne him a son. Shinli knelt, weeping pitifully before the mansion gate, abandoning all restraint as she cried out, "In all these years of marriage, you have never shared a bed with me. How could I possibly have become pregnant? My lord, why have you treated me this way?" She wept bitterly, but Wei Kai showed no mercy at all. In the end, Shinli was sent back to the Shin family and within 2 years passed away in sorrow in Fanjin. Song Guyang and I managed the medicine shop in an orderly manner, and Nian grew up gradually under our care. Another winter arrived with heavy snow falling. Nian gazed out the courtyard gate and said, "Mother, I think I see a familiar person." I chuckled and said, "Don't tell me it's another candied hawthorn seller." Nian's cheeks flushed with a hint of pink as she shook her head. No, that person had a pair of very beautiful eyes, like a calm lake. This description unexpectedly reminded me of Wei Kai, but I heard Wei Kai had gone to the northwestern border 2 years ago. How could he possibly appear in Fanjin? I asked doubtfully, "Are you sure you didn't misread it?" Nian said uncertainly, "Probably not. The snow was too heavy." She wasn't sure if those eyes were just a fleeting illusion. Seeing her still standing on tiptoe and craning her neck, I called out helplessly, "Stop looking and come eat first." The warm aroma of a meal wafted from the small courtyard, and the figure standing outside the gate seemed to smile faintly before turning to leave. The heavy snow fell upon his umbrella, and his face, now etched with fine lines, was no longer young. Yet his eyes remained as clear and bright as the washed-out sky.